Hello everyone and welcome back to Eddie vs the Algorithm series, where every single week of the FPL season the algorithm reveals its very own computer generated team for that specific game week, and then I go away, put together my own individual 11 plus a bench of players for that game week of the season and see if I can beat the computer for overall points. We're doing pretty well so far. Before we get into the juicy stuff revealing the algorithm 11 and my own team for game week 11, we need to have a bit of a recap of how we got on in game week 10 and did I manage to beat the algorithm and make it a rather convincing lead so far this season. As always, if you've got any questions for me or queries about why I've chosen which players, I will try to do my best to explain all of them. But if you've got some suggestions of the players you would have gone for instead, then make sure to leave them down below in the comments. And also, as always, make sure after you've seen both teams, comment down below which team you think is going to win this week. Are you going to be Team Eddie or are you going to be Team Algorithm? It's going to be very interesting to see. And I always like to have a look down below at how many people are thinking that I'm going to win and how many people are thinking that I'm going to lose. I've been proving a lot of people wrong at the moment. Famous last words, but there you go. So without further ado, let's just get into it and have a look at how we got on in game week 10. So here we are live in the fixed studio, and let's have a bit of a look on how Eddie's 11 went on and see how we did in terms of point scores for last game week. In goal, we went with a pretty safe pick, and we went with Edouard Mendy off Chelsea, who managed to bag us 6 points. I was not expecting anything less than that, to be honest, from him, but he definitely came through and did his job, which I was much appreciated for. And we actually not only went for Mendy, but we went with double Chelsea defence on top of that. Ben Chilwell bringing us 8 points, and Reece James coming in with 2 goals, 21 points, and it really was a very good game week for all those people who owned Reece James last week in theory, and if you had him in your team, you very much had a very nice score straight off the bat. Livramento I also started. We didn't need anyone off the bench this week, Livramento included. King, Norman and Brownhill all played and got 2 points, but we had everyone in our starting 11 actually start, I think for one of the first times this year, which was very interesting. But I was a bit surprised, Trent came through, only got 1 point, and Cancelo only with 2, but then again, I can't really be too greedy. The rest of the defence, those first 3, did an absolute wonder job at the back for us and got us a hefty chunk of our points total for this week. It then just got a bit worse, to be honest. In the midfield, it wasn't too bad at all, and the captain, Mohamed Salah, came through, only got 5 points this week, but again, he's Mr. Consistent. It's pretty much a risk to not captain him at this point in FPL. Mane, we got 7 points from. We went with him instead of going for like a Havertz and a double Liverpool defence, as the algorithm, you will see, will have done last week. And then Foden with 2 points was, again, not the best. Crystal Palace came through and obviously delivered a very shocking blow to Man City at the Etihad, and so Foden didn't manage to get on the score sheet or grab an assist this week, but you can't be too greedy when it comes to those things. These things do happen. And then up front, again, a very disappointing showing. It really has been from all our strikers that we seem to be picking at the moment. The big points are coming from the back, and it was a lot of the theory as to why I went with a 5-back formation this week. It made very good sense, and in the end it came through and it worked. I probably would have gone with James and Chilwell anyway, but it still worked the theory, and there were other defenders who scored big point totals or more point totals than a lot of the forwards this week, and it seems to be working quite well for a lot of people. And famously, three-back formations, sometimes 4-3-3s and things like that can work the best in FPL, but no one really ever consistently sticks with the five-at-the-back formation, and for good reason the majority of the time. But for the last few game weeks, at least, with the Chelsea fullbacks firing, with now Conte coming in and playing a 5-back in that Spurs with Reguilon and Doherty or Emerson Royale on the other side, it's going to be very interesting to see how many defenders people are lining up with in their starting 11, especially with Livramento, potentially Lamptey returning, and Ait Nouri providing such good value as well when these forwards are seeming out of form and a bit inconsistent, to be honest. So without further ado, now we need to have a look at how the algorithm 11 got on for game week 10. I need to stop saying without further ado, but let's get into it and just have a look. And it's fair to say that the algorithm had a bit of a stinker last week, with Melier over Mendy in goal, so Leeds failing to keep a clean sheet against Norwich, which not a lot of teams have failed to do so far this season. But I chose to not go with the Leeds keeper just because of how bad Leeds have looked at the back. They've still got a few injuries, ruling a few of their defenders out, and Norwich managed to grab a goal in that 2-1 defeat. Chilwell it remained with Robertson and Trent over just going with Trent in my team. Did turn out to pay the price, with Mane scoring a 7 points to Robertson's 0 after the left back picked up a yellow card and obviously only got the -1 for 2 goals conceded, so overall ended up on net on 0. Laporte, however, he managed to outdo the Scotsman with -3 of his own after a red card for the Frenchman in that game against Crystal Palace. And then Cancelo and Trent were both players that I had in my teams as well. Salah captain seemed the obvious choice, and despite only delivering 5 points, it was even for both sides. Sarr, De Bruyne, Iheanacho and Antonio then obviously quite disappointing for the algorithm. Sarr and Antonio, maybe a bit unlucky. Antonio specifically really should have got something in that 4-1 game, but we both had him in our teams. De Bruyne and Iheanacho, I think, were probably rather unlucky with Iheanacho being substituted at half-time, and De Bruyne maybe not the wisest pick to go for, given that he's not been in the best of form this season, and maybe was swayed a bit too much by De Bruyne's previous performances in previous years of FPL. The bench wasn't required again, but Højbjerg, Sissoko both grabbing 2 points each if they were needed off the bench. So overall, the algorithm ended the game week with an average of 42. It ended on it with 26, so it's a very, very poor showing from the algorithm. That's just, again, pretty rubbish, to be honest. And my team, which you saw before, scored 67, so over double what the algorithm scored this week on my teams. I'm very, very happy with it from my point of view. The algorithm doesn't seem to be performing very well so far this season, especially if it keeps losing to me. I get bantered all the time by how bad my picks are, but I am now 9-3 up against the algorithm as it stands before game week 11. We've obviously had that one draw, which is why the points so far add up to 12. But that is going to round off game week 10. A very convincing win for me this week. Wasn't even close by the end of it. After that Reece James brace, it was pretty much over for the computer this week. But let's see if they can recover well and get a point back on the board. Over 6 points in the gap now between me and the algorithm. So let's see if it can get back on track and make a comeback, just as I did after going 2 down in the first 2 game weeks of the season. So let's move in to having a look at how the algorithm lines itself up for game week 11. So here we go then, the algorithm 11 for game week 11, and let's just jump straight into it. In goal, it's going to be Aaron Ramsdale, who takes on a Watford side who have really struggled for goals in the last couple of weeks. And Ramsdale himself has looked a fantastic asset in goal, keeping a clean sheet in the last few of his games, failing to do so against Palace, but in other games around that, he's looked fantastic, and he's looked fantastic throughout those games, in fact, making a magnitude of saves and some very, very important ones that have kept Arsenal alive once teams have got past their defensive line. And he just seems to be a really great leader for their team. I know that doesn't play out in terms of an FPL points perspective, but it does wonders for their defensive confidence, and you can see that they really are starting to believe that they can go through games without conceding goals, and they've done it against Leicester. I'm sure they'll have a very good chance of doing it against Watford at the Emirates this weekend. In defence this time, it's going to be a back 4, so James and Rudiger line up as the 2 Chelsea defenders this week. It seems to be kind of natural that at this point we have to have 2 Chelsea defenders in. Reece James, after his brace, does find his way in, no surprises there, and Rudiger keeps his spot as a very nailed-on defender for that Burnley fixture at home, which is a very, very nice one for the Blues. White completes a double-up in defence with Ramsdale for that Watford fixture at home. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Him and Rudiger with not much attacking potential, but still good assets. Shane Duffy has a bit more of a threat, you'd have to say, from set pieces than either of them so far statistically, but again, not a massively attacking asset. But home to Newcastle, you'd fancy Brighton's chances of a clean sheet, given that they've been in such fine form recently. In midfield, it's going to be a midfield 3 this week, with Havertz making up the 3 alongside Salah and Son. Havertz makes the Chelsea triple up complete. Salah, just a no-brainer at this point, but Heung-min Son's going to be an interesting one. As Conte's brought into the club at Spurs, he'll be lining up with most likely Son and Kane in the front 2, unless some surprises are pulled out of the hat. And that's going to make Son a very, very nice FPL asset, especially moving into the nice fixtures. Everton have looked pretty poor in recent weeks. They looked very, very shaky against Wolverhampton Wanderers on Monday Night Football, and so perhaps a nice fixture to target, despite the fact that a lot of people aren't considering bringing in Son until game week 12. So it's very, very cool to see that, as well as bringing him in for game week 12, bringing him in this week may not be such a bad idea at all. Of course, a lot of people are considering the move from Havertz to Son, so perhaps doesn't make it ideal that Havertz is in this team as well as Son for when the Blues face Burnley at home. So maybe not the move to make this exact week, but still convincing that Son could do very well against Everton, and I really think it could be that Mune manager bounce comes in and Spurs kick it off with a big victory this weekend at Goodison Park. And then up front, to complete the forward 3, it's going to be Aubameyang, Toney and Vardy. So differential there with Aubameyang. I don't think we've seen him very much in any teams this season, let alone the Algorithm 11 and my team in this series. He faces Watford at home, who again, very, very high up in the charts for expected goals conceded, meaning that they concede a lot of goals, so they're one of the worst off teams in that regard. Very nice fixture to target for Aubameyang. And then Toney, again, targeting a fixture. We're talking about that. Norwich at home. A very nice game for Brentford, it should be. Between him and Mbeumo is going to be an interesting call. There's a few of those kind of 50-50s in this team. There's going to be interesting to see if they swing the right way. You know, James or Chilwell, Son or Kane. Toney and Mbeumo is another one. There's been a lot of comparison, including transfers and videos on this channel that have done some deep comparison between those two players and seeing if who is going to be the best option. The algorithm's clearly made its mind up that going with Son and Tony is perhaps the better way than going to, say, an Mbeumo and Kane, switching it round. And then Jamie Vardy as the final and third striker faces a Leeds side who mentioned has some very, very weak defensive issues at the moment, which means that targeting them, can Leicester bounce back after that defeat against Arsenal? It seems like there will be a very good chance of that, and we know that Vardy is really at the forefront of everything that Leicester do. A bit of a risk to go with Iheanacho or Daka at the moment, and Vardy has penalties on him too, which is an additional plus. So overall, the captain is going to be Mohamed Salah. Not much of a surprise there, but Aubameyang takes the vice-captaincy over someone like a Jamie Vardy, who have also looked very good and has a very, very nice fixture. It's going to be interesting to see how many people actually bring in Aubameyang this week. He's not been near the tops of the charts for players brought in, but that is a very nice fixture of him and Arsenal, and they don't look too bad from game week 12 onwards. But overall, that gives the algorithm a predicted points total this week of 62, as you can see down below me. Let's see if they can actually meet that total this week. I think it was 65 last week, and they ended up with, 27 points. Let's see if the algorithm can actually come true to its projected points total this week. But without further ado, we need to have a look at my team now. See what we can whip up for game week 11 to take on this team. It's going to be quite a difficult one. I've got a few ideas of changes I might like to make. Whether they'll actually be brilliant ones and pay off for the next week in a row, I can't even remember. I've lost track of how many weeks it is that we've beaten the algorithm in a row now. I'm really getting cocky. So people need to shoot me down to size in the comments, please. I'm giving you permission to go free reign. But I'm going to go away. I'm going to whip up my own team, come back, show you guys that team, and you're going to comment down below whether you think I'm going to be able to beat the algorithm this week for game week 11. And here's Eddie's 11, and I'd be lying a bit if I hadn't said I'm going a little bit boring this week, and the majority of the team is kind of the same. The entire front six has remained the same, but there have been changes, and quite a lot of changes elsewhere that I do want to mention. I've changed the captaincy, for one thing. Not the actual captaincy, but the vice-captaincy to Jamie Vardy, which, to be honest, won't make a difference. Why I've even mentioned it, pretty pointless to say. Chilwell has come in over Rudiger. I do think the fact that Alonso played in midweek, the same with Azpilicueta on the other side for James, makes a very good chance of James and Chilwell starting at the weekend, which is why I've gone with a few perhaps a bit more shaky and risky picks for the other two defenders. I've gone with Ait-Nouri and then Tariq Lamptey of Brighton, and I think Lamptey, I'm yet to hear the news from the press conferences. Lamptey, I think, could do wonders if he does start. Lively Lamptey, as he's called. But just in case he doesn't, I've got Livramento sat there, first sub against Aston Villa, and I'm more than willing to have him come on for this team. The rest, I think, is pretty nailed. Ait-Nouri will play with Marçal out, and he looks fantastic whenever he plays. And at 4.3, an absolute steal. Lamptey at 4.4, absolute steal. Livramento is now more expensive than the two of them at 4.5. Salah, Son and Havertz in midfield are very, very strong. I didn't really want to change it. I couldn't quite stretch to afford Kane and Mbeumo over Son and Tony, but I think I probably would prefer that combo just for this week, but I don't think there's enough in it to justify downgrades elsewhere. Vardy and Aubameyang, I really did want to keep for their fixtures. Same as reason for having an Mbeumo or a Tony. I really wanted one of them for that Norwich game. And I think if your team looks anything like this for this week, you're going to do fantastically well. My projected points total, as you can see, 56 for this week to the algorithm 62. So we're not too far behind at all. Some of that might be to do with predicted lineups, with whether Lamptey will start, etc. Maybe that could be the points difference between me and the algorithm in terms of projections anyway. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see if I can make it 10-3 in this series and get into double digits myself, being the first one to get into that point. And will the algorithm get there at all at any point during the season, or will I even get there at all? Maybe the algorithm will win every game week here on out and I will break down into tiers. But I'm hoping that I can come out on top this week with a few subtle but hopefully important changes that I've made to the team. A bit more attacking threat from defenders I think could be the key here, and some clean sheets maybe for Wolverhampton Wanderers instead of Arsenal could be the way forward, but I have still got cover for that with Ramsdale in goal. So that is going to wrap up Eddie versus the algorithm for Game Week 11. As I mentioned at the start of the video, please do leave in the comments, are you team Eddie or team algorithm this week? I appreciate I've gone with a few kind of favourite picks, you have to say, a bit like Ollie, I just like picking my favourites, Ait-Nouri, Lamptey, etc. Are they sensible decisions? Do you think so? Leave them down below in the comments. I would love to be getting these guys into my team personally, but I can't, so it's a nice thing just to have it, this kind of series where I can do this and play around and go with a few more fun picks who perhaps I don't have the sensible choices and availability to actually make those choices and take risks in my own team. But I do like this team, and I think it will perform very well this game week. I'm hoping that it can outscore 56, to be honest, and I'm thinking that we could maybe hit in the 70 region if we do well enough. A lot of things will depend on that, how the Chelsea game goes against Burnley. You never know. If Burnley come and win 1-0 through a Chris Wood header, then it's pretty much chances over. But that will wrap up the video for today. I hope you have found it useful. If you have, leave a thumbs up on the video. Make sure to subscribe down below in the bottom right-hand corner if you're new to the Fantasy Football Fix YouTube channel. And if you want to see a bit more of me, then you can check out the link to my channel, plus our other presenters, links down in the bottom of the description. You can see all the links to all the tools at fantasyfootballfix.com has to offer down there as well. And without further ado, I will see you all later. I will stop keeping you from the Friday night football that's coming up later. So make sure you change your teams before the deadline, and I wish you all the best of luck for this coming game week. Goodbye.